This is the second in a three-part series. Last month we talked about getting started. Today we're going to talk about online reputation management. Invariably, if you're going to put yourself out there online, there's going to be some sort of negative comment or feedback at some point. Somebody's not going to be happy with your service. In the same way that if they came to your location and they were dissatisfied, they might tell you. Now it's so much easier and people can be anonymous and they do it online. So we're going to talk about several ways to manage that online, things that you need to look out for, and then the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how you can respond to those. So first, I just want to do a quick review in case some of you weren't here or don't remember. Last month, we did social media first steps. We talked about the goal of social media. Having one is important. If you don't know why you're online, then you can't ever know if you reached your goal. Who you're trying to reach, always keep that in mind when you're participating online. The resources available in your business. And then I also posted additional worksheets on what to post, generating your content, ideas for a content calendar, things like that. So if you were here last month, is there anybody who went through and kept doing some of these and maybe has a success story? Yeah, Kit.
Part of what I did was decide who I was trying to reach, and I was trying to reach out to the special needs community. I run a wellness center. I do massage and work with special needs children. So on Facebook, I joined several groups. I asked to join several closed groups. And I've also made a point of daily updating my Facebook and my Twitter accounts with just little blurbs of things that are going on. And I've noticed that organically I'm moving up the search engines.
Excellent.
And I've got people who just found me.
Great. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. So we're going to talk about, again, three. I like to do things in threes. And we're going to talk about three main topics today. First is personalizing your online persona and how you can't just set up an online social media campaign and have it be like a professional marketing policy. You have to have a professional persona. Number two, establishing policies and procedures to protect your business and your brand when things go wrong. And finally, managing employees who handle your online accounts for you. So I want to do a quick lesson. How many of you are familiar with SEO and know that it stands for search engine optimization? Good. Okay, so about 30%. That's good. I just wanted to, I'm going to say SEO a lot in here because reviews are highly indexed by all of the search engines because they're unique content and they're usually very verifiable, is created by a human. So search engines move them up the response in their algorithms very, very easily. So search engines are Google, Yahoo, Bing, wherever you go and you're trying to find out what you want to find and you type in your search terms. And search engines have two major functions. And I want you to think about a subway map or a street grid. And within these algorithms, there are what we call spiders, and they just go from website to website. And they look at every single page on every single website, and they say, these are all the words on this website, and this is all the content. So they're just crawling around, and making a map. And if you're thinking about a subway map, that's why they call it the web. It looks like an internet web. So they're going out there, they're building an index, and when you type in your search terms, they want to return an answer to your question that is highly validated by all the information they have. And the reason they want to do that is because you're going to click on it, and then they can charge for ads. So that's kind of how a search engine works. Think of it as like a subway map or a street grid crawling around there so that they can give us information back that's valid when we search for a topic. So everybody's probably heard this in the past. I mean, when I was in marketing, my first marketing class about 20 years ago, they said if a customer comes into your store or your restaurant and they have a bad experience when they leave, how many people are they going to tell? 7, 20? Yep. The average is 9 or 10. So I started with 10. If somebody goes out and they have to reach out to people and meet them in person, I might call my sister, I might call my neighbor and say, this was terrible, but that's a lot of work. That was then. Now, everything's online and it's there forever. And the research is showing that 90% of consumers say they do go out and they are influenced as to whether or not they're going to buy from you by the online reviews they read. Number two, 42% of consumers, and these studies are tens of thousands of people over the course of a year. 42% of consumers expect a response within 60 minutes of posting to your page. And most consumers do kind of vary that length of time. So if it's in a major corporation, they expect it in less than an hour. If it's a mom and pop store, if it's a small business, you've got a little more time. They know that you don't have 24-hour staff on your social media sites, but they do expect a response within 24 hours, even in a one-person business. And in this study, almost 30% of the participants made more than $150,000. And of those people making more than $150,000 a year, 100% of them said if they have a negative experience with a business, they are going to complain about it online somewhere. So your very high net worth, high revenue, high disposable income people are going to complain if you don't treat them well. So I want to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. I wanted to have some examples of negative feedback or just feedback online and how it was handled. So you've probably heard of JetBlue. It's one of the hip, trendy airlines, and it's fun and it's exciting. And this woman, Lindsay, was on a vacation, and all she did was tag JetBlue in her comment about how sad she was that she had to leave her vacation. This is not a complaint, but this is interaction with a business online, and she tagged JetBlue. And you can see that she posted at 9:09 p.m. At 9:19, 10 minutes later, JetBlue said, well, we hear you. Wouldn't it be nice if we could always be on vacation? Lucky for us, we get to see you again. So that alone would have been enough, but while she was flying, JetBlue mobilized their employees to create a welcome home parade. Okay? So for the price, I don't know, $20 in poster board and 5 minutes of their employees' time, they created a welcome home parade. She retweeted this photo, and this is one retweet and one like, but if you went back and found it, she shared it with her followers, her followers shared it with their followers, and for, I don't know, $30, maybe $100 in effort, they probably got thousands of dollars of free advertising. So if somebody says something to you online, you want to set up a Google alert and know that people are mentioning your business or tagging your business, and look for opportunities like this to increase the value of your interaction. Okay? So the bad. And doing presentations like this is so important that you're aware of these things, but it is so killing, the things that I see online. People are very anonymous for the most part. When we get to ugly, you'll see that. But there are bad things online. So who has heard of Sons of Maxwell? Anybody? Okay, they're a Canadian band, and they were traveling on United to a gig, and they were going through Chicago's O'Hare Airport. And when they landed in their layover, the lead singer heard the woman behind him looking out the window, and she said, oh my God, they're throwing guitars around outside on the tarmac. And they were flinging the band's stuff around, throwing it around. And so for 9 months, the band tried to get them to repair a $3,500 guitar that they had broke the neck on. And within 9 months, they went back and forth. There were letters, calls, emails, nothing. And they finally said, no, sorry, we're not repairing it. So they wrote a song called United Breaks Guitars. And it is a 4.5-minute song. And a week after it was posted on YouTube, 150,000 views. 2 months later, 5 million. And now we're 5 years out, over 14 million views. And so you think, well, it's United. United's okay. They didn't fold. But how many people who have to check valuable luggage have seen this and are now not going to do business with United? And more importantly, if you're not as big as United, could you survive this? No, you couldn't. So this is number one, 14 million views in 5 years. Every time it's viewed, it's tagged properly. It comes up very high. If you Google United Breaks Guitars, this comes up. Additionally, other people have posted it. It's always going to be at the top. But here's a website that I use with clients a lot. It's called linktally.com. And I plugged in that URL. You can plug in any URL on the internet, and it's going to tell you how many times it was shared and where. So over 212,000 shares for that video from YouTube. So when you consider the amplifying power of social media to get something out there, something negative about your business, you really have to consider that the multiplicative amplification can drown you quickly. So if I'm sharing it from this URL to Facebook and I show it to my 500 friends and 50 of them show it to their 300 friends, we're probably getting close to 50 to 60 million eyes have seen this video, okay? So again, it didn't ruin their company, but could it ruin a small company? Absolutely. So you want to make sure if you did something wrong, handle it better than United did here. Particularly when you're dealing with artists. They're really creative online. Yes, sir?
Did United ever respond?
They did eventually, after I think around 6 million views, they did pay for the repairs. Yeah. Yeah. Right? They could have saved. What is that? Oh, did you find it? It's a really catchy song. I would very advise that you go listen to it. Yeah, it's a very good song. It's very catchy. People have downloaded it. They sell it on iTunes. I mean, it's a really great song. So, okay. Yeah. So here's the ugly. Has anybody ever heard of Pigalle Boston? Pigalle? Okay, when I talk about it, you'll probably remember it. So this was a very fancy white linen tablecloth restaurant in Boston. It was very expensive. And a woman went for Thanksgiving dinner. And she spent $200 on her meal, and she was dissatisfied with it. So she should have probably mentioned it while she was there, but she didn't. What she did was she posted on her Facebook page, and she said that the Thanksgiving dinner was terrible, the pumpkin pie was awful, it tasted like vomit, and it was rude, first of all. It wasn't the best, most constructive way to complain. But she posted it, and it was up there for 6 hours before the head chef and owner posted finally, and his response was, "Hey, Sandy, go blank yourself." Okay? So his first response, this is what happens, this is what I see quite a bit, is when someone attacks your small business, you have an emotional connection to that. So your first response is defense and anger, right? And that was his first response. So, okay, maybe he could recover from this. No, he did not. He kept going for about 16 hours attacking this woman, saying that she was fat, saying, well, maybe she shouldn't eat anyway. They went back and forth, and people started taking sides, and of course some people backed him up, but everybody was sharing it, and it went negative viral, and millions of people saw it. So if you want to go eat there and try there, you can't, because within 6 weeks they were out of business. He lost his business. Now he claims that he was going to try another concept and he was shutting it down anyway. But it's kind of interesting that he closed up within, a couple weeks of this. So the first step, we're going to go over writing your policy for how to deal with negative feedback, but always, just never, never, never cuss your fans out. That's a good rule of thumb, okay? If you learn nothing else today, don't type a cuss word on the internet, okay? It's just a good place to start, right? Never drop the F-bomb online. It's just a good rule of thumb. So. All right. So last month, I put up this chart to explain to you how you go from, on the left side, obscurity, people don't know you, to making money from them. And the important part is you can go from people not knowing you at all, and you can use social media to create fans, and that can be positive or negative. So you always want to manage that interaction. You want to put out good content from our first lesson that's going to be entertaining to them, that they're going to engage with, and it's going to draw them to your business. But if there's anything negative, you can completely cut any engagement off or any brand building off very quickly. So on your table, I have a sheet for you to plan for negative comments. And this is the only one I brought today because people have such a problem thinking, you go online and you think, I'm on Facebook all the time and it's fun and I look at my friends' grandbabies on there and that's all I do. No, as a business owner, you need to consider the ugliness that can happen. So I want you to take a minute and write down examples of negativity or negative comments to you, your business, that you've either experienced or seen online. And then to the side, I want you to put, would you always respond, never respond, or sometimes respond? Because next we're going to talk about when you do that. And then after a minute, I'm going to have you talk at your table, and hopefully you can come up with at least 3 or 4 examples so that as we're moving forward, you've got it in your head that negativity is there, we need to categorize it, and how are we going to interact. So go ahead and take a minute and brainstorm a couple examples that you might have seen online. Okay, so who would like to give us an example of one they've experienced in their own business. Yes, ma'am. Got one? Okay. Yes, in the red? Orange? Yeah?
Yeah, I had posted something on a Facebook page for a lady that I work for, and her competitor posted a comment not saying that she was a competitor, saying this was inaccurate and stuff like that, so.
Okay, so she posted something for a friend and a competitor posted claiming it was inaccurate. Okay, excellent. One was up here? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've seen some on our sites where it says the truck was late, when in fact it wasn't.
Okay, so the truck was late and it wasn't. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so one thing that we were thinking about, we were talking about up here was that profanity on your page, there is a filter on Facebook and you can turn the profanity filter on, and if anybody tries to comment that way, it will not show up. So there are certain tools that you can use, and one of the things that you need to consider is that, and also making sure that no one can tag you without your approval. And I was just thinking about the elections that just came up a year ago when they started. Several friends of mine were running for office, and all of a sudden, overnight, one person posted a pornographic photo and tagged every Republican candidate in it. And they did the same with the Democrats. And then I think they did one for independents, but they wanted 2 or 3. Because they hadn't turned off the tagging ability, anybody could tag them in any photo. So they did this overnight, and overnight everyone could see that these people were tagged in this photo. And of course, we went in and we fixed it, but you can prevent that by making sure that you can't be tagged. So make sure you go into your settings and set those 2 things up. I separate negative feedback into 3 main categories that we're going to look at next. The first is abusive or profane posts, and that is somebody coming to your page, leaving a recommendation or a review. They always call them recommendations, but they could be negative, that are abusive or profane to either you, your employees, or your fellow followers, the members of your community. Trolls, have you heard of that term? Trolls. This is like grown-up bullies, and we're going to talk about those people. And then valid complaints. So these are service issues, or the food wasn't good, or I tried to call and make a reservation, or I came in, I didn't like this. So these are valid complaints that you need to address. So the first one we're going to look at is abusive and profane. I talked about last month how you don't own social media. Whoever puts out that platform owns it, and they can change the rules at any time. However, on your page, you can set it up, and you can say, this is my front yard, and you kids are not going to play here if you're going to cuss each other out. So you have to establish a policy, and you need to say, I'm going to protect my followers and my employees, and you're not going to participate here unless you can play nice. And you post this somewhere, and you, more importantly, you know it in your head so that when you see it, you know exactly how to respond. So that's the first step, is if this happens and you don't know what to do, you immediately get defensive or angry. So the first thing is have a policy, whatever it is, and post it. Don't avoid the issue. If somebody comes in and they attack and you just delete it, that will embolden them, and they're going to come back and post again and say, oh, I don't have free speech here, which they don't, of course, but they're going to make a bigger deal of it. I always delete it if it's abusive or profane on all of my client pages, and then if needed, I'll make a comment and say, we had this comment, I had to delete it because they attacked a fellow community member or whatever the reason. If the person comes back and posts again, I block them from the page, because you don't have to accept that kind of angry or abusive behavior. You just don't. So make sure your policy is set, people know about it, and then do it the same way every time. The second one is trolls, and so these are people who, for whatever reason, we don't really know. They just go out and they're negative online, and there's a lot of research about it right now, and the latest study that I read for an online marketing magazine says that they align very closely with sociopaths. Their mental issue is that they don't feel like they have power in any part of their life, so they're anonymous online and they can be more important than they are. So they act out here. We don't know why. And I always say never engage except to kill them with kindness. If you can respond to this weird negativity and say, we're so sorry, how can we make it right? Often it confuses them and then they go away. If they don't, you need to try to figure out what it is. So I had 2 clients who were restaurants, and within the same month, the same guy posted negative feedback 2 or 3 times in the same week. And it was always, the beer's too expensive, the salmon is too salty, and the staff is not very helpful. So I went to his page. He had joined less than a month ago. He had no friends, and he had followed over 350 businesses. And he was in San Salvador. He had never visited these restaurants. So why is he doing that? First of all, he could have been paid by somebody to go out and make trouble for other businesses. Could have been a competitor, probably not. He could just be an ornery jerk, but he had never been there. So I deleted him and blocked him. And this happens all the time. South America, the Middle East, Turkey, India, people who just have a lot of free time for some reason are doing this. So they are out there, and there are gonna be, if you get big enough and you are popular enough, you're gonna attract some sort of attention at some point, and you don't have to engage them. You can delete them and block them. And finally, valid complaints. Again, remember the chef, your first step is to step back and breathe. Take it in. If he had simply responded, we wished you had mentioned it while you're in the restaurant, we would have happily replaced this, that, or the other. We would love to have you come back for a meal, a complimentary meal, and we'd love to make this right. Give us another chance. It would have been, nobody would have ever seen it. His business would not have folded, right? So breathe. Consider the learning opportunity. Perhaps they had a new bakery chef. Perhaps they had bought new product or new ingredients and they weren't working out. He didn't even think about that. Number 3, always respond with kindness and care. If somebody came to your business and told you in person they were dissatisfied, you would not say, hey, go blank yourself. You would say, oh, how can I help you? And then finally, pretend everyone is watching, because they are. And there have been several examples in Georgia of friends or just people I know where they have complained about something that's immediately blown up. Because if you delete it, somebody's taken a screenshot. They're going to share it with all their friends. People are going to take a side and they're going to share it. And most of the time when I watch these, I have alerts to go off on these because I watch them for research purposes. And there's always somebody, and they have put in a sticker or an emoticon where they're just eating popcorn. People look for these and they watch them, and they want to help damage the man, whoever the business owner is, who has harmed this poor individual consumer. And people will share it for them, whether they know you or not. So people are always watching. And here is an example of a business that handled it well. This is Michael Fournier, and he tagged, this is Twitter, and he tagged Whole Foods. Whole Foods has a Google alert. You should have Google Alert set up, and I'm going to load a how-to so that you can set these up on all your platforms. And they said, hey, dear Whole Foods, thanks for discontinuing my stevia in the tub. Like, I'm going to sit there and open 500 packets for my sour mix. Hashtag ruined my routine. So it's not really negative. It's kind of funny. He's probably not going to avoid Whole Foods, but this is a customer complaint. And they responded back and said, hey, we can definitely look into this. Was this a 365 item? Was it a shaker container? So they're asking questions. They validated him and made him feel relevant. They're addressing his issue, and everybody sees it. So if I go to say, well, I'm going to go look at this new business, and I'm going to do some research and see if they're good, and I've seen that when there was a complaint or some sort of dissatisfaction, they handled it well, I am 67% more likely to convert to a customer if I see negative reviews that were handled well. Okay, so think about it. If you have 100 people looking up your business and they see those negative reviews and you handled them well, they're two-thirds more likely to become customers. Okay, so that's why we were talking here about deleting negative responses or feedback. And first of all, you can't unless it is libel or there's some legal action, and it takes a lot of time and it still never goes away. So you don't want to delete those. You want some negative reviews out there if they're valid and real, because if you handle them well, people see that you're a real business. If they only see positive reviews, people think it's part of your polished, formulaic marketing machine, and they don't think you're real at all. Okay? If they see something super negative, and we were talking about what if your competitors have gone out there and falsified complaints to make you look bad, most people online who know to go to look at reviews have kind of an internal meter, and they're going to say this one's not real. Or if it's way over the top negative, they'll say that one's not real, and they mentally discount it. They're going to look at real, valid complaints. So don't worry about deleting them. Yes, so can negative reviews help? Absolutely. And that's why you want them out there to make you seem real. And remember we talked about SEO? Even a negative review is going to boost your return on Google. So the more reviews you have, the more you're going to come up on the first page of Google, for example. So you don't want that negative review that has never been responded to be the first response. So how do you bury that one eventually? You solicit positive reviews from other people You can't get rid of a negative review, you can bury it in positive reviews. So remember that. And you want to have your good clients, you want to always be asking people to leave recommendations on LinkedIn, or leave recommendations on your Facebook page, or go to Yelp or Urban Spoon or whatever's appropriate for your business, and bury those negative ones. Classy responses can convert. When you handle it well, you can build your brand and trust in your brand and you, and also continuous improvement. So let's say Whole Foods had gotten rid of that product and enough people want it back, they know that they need to get it back. Or the taste of this particular item is not very good and enough people complain about it, you know you need to change your menu, for example. Okay, so employee usage. People always want to hire me to tell them where to go and kind of what to do, and then they say, okay, I've got my daughter or my son who's home from college, and they're on Facebook all the time, so they're going to handle it. If you're, all of us are on social media, we're consumers of social media. We use social media. That does not mean that we are social media managers. I drive my car all the time. That does not mean, actually I did change the catalytic converter, but most people can't. You're not a mechanic if you drive a car. I use a car, I'm not a car expert, okay? So when you outsource this to an employee, you need to ensure that they know who they're reaching, who they're trying to reach, what your brand culture is, what your branding standards are, what they need to post, and you need to be on top of that. So for them, whoever, if that's your employee or your son or daughter or a company that you outsource to, you need to define the voice of your platform. So if you're on Facebook, what are you saying and how do you want to be presented? For at least a period of time, you want to review all content prior to posting. And I usually recommend that you have at least a week ahead of time. And we've all read stories about, and it's usually on Twitter, because they usually have, larger companies often have interns on Twitter, and they post something in the middle of the night that's highly offensive, and before you know it, that person's fired, but it's all over the news. So you need to review that content, and you need to maintain control of all accounts. And again, this happens a lot in restaurants, that wait staff will come in the summer, they've been out at college, they took a marketing class, and they say, I'm gonna set up all your social media for you. And they manage it for that summer while they're there, and then they go to college, and nobody bothered to get the passwords. So a lot of my clients, I am trying to figure out how to get access to all these platforms that they own, but don't have access to. And so at the best case, they're out there doing nothing, and you're alienating or confusing people about your brand. Worst case, an employee leaves with the password and actively damages your brand. So never give up control of your platform to an employee. This one's delicate, and you definitely need to talk to a lawyer about this, but if you have an employee handbook and you say that whatever, before you hire people, you should be Googling them, because if they're putting things that are inappropriate out there about themselves, you know, you don't hire them. But once you've hired them, you've probably seen a lot of news reports where people go and say, oh, I hate working here, and the boss is an idiot, and we do really crappy work, and our clients, I can't believe they still do business with us. You need to make sure, you need to be monitoring them on their off time if it could damage your brand, particularly if they have access to your accounts. Freedom of speech versus asking for money. People, Americans, God bless them, you don't have the right to say everything and then expect me to spend my money with you. That's the difference. So again, during the election time, there's a friend of mine, and he said, yay, my guy won, and I can't imagine what was going through the minds of all the morons who voted for the other guy. Well, what if I'm one of those morons? And now he's alienated everybody who voted for the other guy. So you can say whatever you want, but you should fully expect not to get my money if you call me a moron. We can have different opinions, but you know, rein it in, people. So these are the next steps. The next 3 slides, every week I'm going to post another exercise sheet or template for writing these next 3 things. So I'm going to walk you through. Next week you can download Handling Negative Feedback Online. I talked about the 3 main categories, and I'm going to give you a template, and you can write out, okay, if I experience these 3 things, this is my response pattern, okay? The week after that, I'm going to have you go through a template on how to say, this is what we're going to do online. Here are all our logins, and they're kept here. Here's our review policy, and here is your off-duty policy. And again, take what you want and don't use what doesn't make sense for your business. But all that's going to be on there in 2 weeks. And then the next week is looking for opportunities to generate positive online exposure. So that is setting up your Google alerts, figuring out how to monitor your mentions on social media, and then kind of crafting a couple of generic responses to complaints and positive reviews. So how do you keep that going? How do you interact with people and build those positive reviews? Okay, and don't forget, that is on the bottom of your worksheet today, but every month on my website you'll have Chamber, October, November, and December, and that's where all these downloads will be. These slides will be there, and I'll put the videos on there so you can also refresh your memory.